Joining me now from Capitol Hill is Washington Post congressional reporter Ed O'Keefe. He's also a CBS News political contributor. Ed, thank you so much for being with us. Where it stands now, do we know whether the bill would pass if the House were to hold a vote by the end of the week? I've seen a lot of back and forth on this.
If the vote were held today, Jamie, it looks like it probably would, but only by 1 or 2 votes. And that shows you how perilously close they are to defeat up here. Basically, any more than 22 House Republicans voting no would kill this thing if you presume, as we are led to believe, that all Democrats would vote against it. At this point, various whip counts put it at around 20 House Republicans saying no, but a larger collection still undecided or really refusing to say where they are exactly on this bill. That's why you're seeing folks like the Vice President, the White House Budget Director, and others make trips up here to Capitol Hill to try to convince these guys to vote yes, possibly as early as the end of this week, maybe over the weekend, going into a congressional recess for the House side of Congress that begins over this coming weekend.
And this assumes that all Democrats will vote no on this issue. The White House, though, does appear to be nailing down conservative support this time around and then going after moderates. Does this approach appear to be more successful than the last attempt to you?
Well, what we're seeing more of, Jamie, is the president and the White House really directly engaging with the naysayers, with the people who are refusing to vote yes, at least support it so far. This conversation that apparently happened between Fred Upton of Michigan and Billy Long of Missouri to get about an $8 billion commitment to help pay for people with pre-existing conditions should their states back out of that part of the law is a sign, really, that the president is now directly involved in trying to find ways to win over those skeptics. The question is, will those moderates and the other conservatives who say so far that they don't like this, will this be enough for them? There are others already signaling that $8 billion over 5 years, as the Upton Amendment would do it, is not enough necessarily to pay for people with pre-existing conditions who may not end up being covered. And any sign of doubt that anyone with a pre-existing condition would have struggles being covered by health insurance is going to be enough to keep a certain number of members from voting yes for this bill.
Well, I wanted to ask you, is there any way to gauge whether $8 billion, though, is really going to help those with pre-existing conditions? Is it enough to protect the sick at this point?
I'm no health insurance expert, and I haven't dived into all the dirty details of this bill, but the early indications from critics of this whole process is that $8 billion over 5 years isn't going to be enough to sustain things going forward. Again, if those estimates get out there and you're a skeptical Republican or somebody who's in a vulnerable re-election fight next year, that's probably going to be enough for you to say, I can't support this thing. Therefore, you wonder how much more can the White House really come up with that gets enough moderates and conservatives together to pass this bill and move it on to the Senate, where, frankly, it's going to get rewritten anyway and then sent back to the House for final passage, at which point it may end up getting defeated because they made too many changes. So we're kind of in a moment here where things have really stalled, and Republicans know that anything short of passing a bill out of the House is a real big long-term problem for them. Getting it out of the House as early as this week is a short-term win, but one that will lead to even bigger challenges over in the Senate.
Well, I wanted to ask you, too, is there any indication that additional spending could end up angering conservatives here, especially when you talk about $8 billion possibly not being enough with the pre-existing conditions and it going back and forth for a while?
That's part of the concern here, is that any more money devoted to this may be a bridge too far for some of these conservatives, especially on the same day that they're being asked to pass a spending bill that many fiscal conservatives would say didn't do enough to cut federal spending and in essence hands a lot of wins to Democrats instead of making cuts to government spending that Republicans had been promising they would make.
Well, Republicans were really looking to use savings from repealing Obamacare to offset some tax cuts. What happens to tax reform if this doesn't get passed a second time?
Tax reform can't go anywhere until health care gets sorted out. It's either going to get killed off entirely, in which case the bean counters have to go back to the drawing board and come up with new numbers, or they got to see what savings will be in the health care bill that then allow them to work out exactly what they can do on tax reform. Remember, the goal for tax reform is to get it done at the end of the year. It's going to take months, though, far much more homework than health care to work on that, and the longer the health care bill takes, the longer it'll take for tax reform, the less likely it passes by the end of the year.
All right, Ed O'Keefe in Washington for us with the Washington Post. Thank you so much.
Take care, Jamie.